is up, YouTube? This is 82 and welcome back. This time, continuing on talking about greatest teams of all time. Today, we're going to talk about the 1995-96 Chicago Bulls. And this, in my opinion, is the greatest team of all time. Some people will say the 72 Lakers. Some people will say the 17 Warriors. I really don't care if people have another opinion. You know, it's all good, spirited debate with me. But this is my opinion, greatest team of all time. Now, one thing you got to understand is going into the history of this team. So the Bulls prior to the 95-96 season had a lot of success in the 90s. So for anyone who doesn't know, they drafted Michael Jordan in 1984, and he was a franchise player. Generational talent, turned the tide of this team around. You know, the Bulls never really had much success prior to Jordan. You know, sure, they had a few good teams here and there, but no championships. And so he turned the team around by the late 80s. And they built this team around the draft. So they got Scottie Pippin through a trade. You know, he was drafted by the Seattle Supersonics, although he was traded and never actually played a game with the Seattle Supersonics. But they also had guys like Horace Grant, Charles Oakley. You know, they were really good at picking players, defensive-minded players to build around Jordan. So Pippin's first season would be the 87-88 season. And the Bulls would struggle in terms of getting to the finals in the late 80s. From 88 to 90, they would lose to the Pistons 3 years in a row. So in 88, they lost in the conference finals, or semifinals, in 5 games to the Pistons. In 89, they lost to the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals. And in 1990, they lost to the Pistons in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So they came up short quite a bit to the Pistons. And as I don't ever like this argument that the Pistons got old. That's why the Bulls won, because I think that's absolute horseshit. Let me tell you why. Isaiah Thomas was only 28. Joe Dumars was only 26, right? Bill Laimbeer, yes, you could say he was older, or he was 32. Dennis Rodman was 28. You know, I just really don't like that argument. I mean, Jordan was 26 and Dumars was 26. It's not... They try to make it sound like they were just washed up by them. It was more so injuries what made the Pistons kind of fall off in the early 90s. But the Bulls beat them fair and square in 1991. They finally overcame the hump. And they got their revenge in a fitting way. They swept the Bulls. And the Pistons walked off the court. You know, they were sore losers about it. And the Bulls would win their first championship. 91, they'd beat the Lakers. Then they'd win a second championship in 92 against the Portland Trailblazers. And they'd win a third championship against the Phoenix Suns. I won't go into details about those because those are videos topics for another day. I'm talking about the 96 Bulls. I'm just giving you a backstory. Now, they won the 3 championships. However, the 93-94 season, they didn't have Michael Jordan because Jordan was dealing with the death of his father. And not only that, he wanted to go play baseball. So, despite not having Michael Jordan, the team went 55-27, which to me is a testament to Phil Jackson's amazing coaching. And Scottie Pippen doesn't get enough credit for that year, you know. They wouldn't be anything without him. You know, Jordan was playing the 93-94 season for the Birmingham Barons. And he would send a fax to the Bulls organization saying, "I'm back." And at the tail end of the 94-95 season, he would play the final 17 games, and the Bulls would finish the year 47-35. So we were thinking during this time, hey, the Bulls could win it all. But the problem was the Bulls lost a lot of their interior depth that they had prior. They didn't have Horace Grant anymore. He was on the Orlando Magic. They didn't have Charles Oakley, obviously. He's been gone for a while. I mean, not much you can do with Will Perdue. So they go to the Eastern Conference semifinals, right? And they get the shit beat out of them by the Orlando Magic. The Magic dominate them because they don't have much size inside. And I think that was a big reason why they were able to knock the Bulls out. But also, I think it's because Jordan was a little rusty. He had to get back out there and work his basketball muscles. So what was the big offseason move that the Bulls did to stay on top? Well, they traded for Dennis Rodman, who was a rival that played for the Pistons in the late 80s. Right? You know, the opposition coming. It's kind of crazy to think about because Jordan really hated the Bulls. Jordan really hated the Pistons. Pippin really hated the Pistons. So they end up trading Will Perdue to the Spurs for Dennis Rodman, which is, I know it seems like a very lopsided trade, but to tell you why it was so lopsided, well, the Spurs, they could not get along with Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman and him I can't talk today. I'm sorry, guys. He clashed with David Robinson. You know, Dennis Rodman and him clashed quite a bit. And so they traded him. And they thought during the time, well, he's washed up. He's getting up there in age. He's not going to play very good. Well, you know, he was 34 years old. They thought he's only going to go down from here. So the Bulls got a steal because I don't think people really understand how great Dennis Rodman was. I mean, this guy, I know if you just look at his numbers, it's probably not going to jump out at you, other than the rebounding numbers, obviously. But despite being one of the greatest defenders of all time, he never averaged above more than one steal or one block. But from 90 to 91 all the way up until 94-95, he was averaging 17.8 rebounds per game. So that's pretty insane. And his highest rebounding average was 18.7 in the 91-92 season. And he's a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. 8-time All-Defense. And the Bulls, they already had Jordan and Pippin, who were two of the greatest defenders of their generation. Jordan had won Defensive Player of the Year in 1988. And they also had Ron Harper. I mean, he was acquired the year prior, but I'm saying he's a great defender himself. And Ron Harper never actually made an all-defensive team, which to me is kind of mind-boggling because I think he's one of the greatest defenders to not make an all-defense. I mean, this guy, God, he averaged 2.5 steals his rookie season. I think the first 6 years, or the first 6 seasons in the league, he averaged more than 2 steals per game. He's just, I don't know. It's always baffled me why he never made an all-defensive team. It's just because it was stacked during that time, I'm sure. So, you got Ron Harper, you got Jordan, you got Pippin, you got Rodman. You know, probably one of the greatest defensive teams of all time. Well, who else do you got? You got Luke Longley, and I should point out, the centers on the Bulls team, they weren't necessarily great, but they knew how to play their role. Luke Longley was the best shot blocker that the team had. He put up 1.4 shot blocks. And, you know, they had John Sally, who also played with the Pistons, coming off their bench. And he was a great shot blocker himself. So they also had Steve Kerr, who played for the Cavs prior to this, and he was probably the greatest three-point shooter of that generation. I'm not saying he was this offensively gifted player in that he's going to get you 21 points per game. No, he was a spot-up shooter. You know, sometimes they're overrating him nowadays, making him sound like he's a perennial all-star or something. But he knew how to play his role. And they had Tony Kukoc, sixth man of the year for the Chicago Bulls that year. Put up 13.1 points per game, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists, and he averaged 49% from field goal line, and he averaged 40% from 3. And he was a great free throw shooter. He averaged 77%, I shouldn't say great, good. And he was a good passer. One of his nicknames was the Waiter because of how he served people. So that was their team. They had, the other guys like Dickie Simpkins, Bill Wennington, Judd Buechler. But these guys knew how to play their role. That's what made this team so good. Well, Jordan led the pack, obviously. He averaged 30.4 points per game, 6.6 rebounds per game, 4.3 assists, 2.2 steals. And this is when he started becoming a great three-point shooter. He actually averaged 42% from 3, 49% from the field. Scottie Pippen averaged 19, 6.4, and 5.9 assists. Like I said, Kukoc had 13. And Rodman averaged 14.9 rebounds per game. Pretty insane, right? And this team had the then greatest record of all time. They went 72-10, which was broken by the 2016 Warriors. Although I consider them better than 2016 Warriors because the Warriors didn't win the championship. This team did. And they were the number 1 rated offense in the league and the number 1 rated defense in the league. Now, to me, this is insane. Check this out, right? They averaged, and I know this doesn't sound too impressive, but let me explain. They averaged 105.2 points per game. You got to understand, in the mid to late 90s, the pace was slowing down. Through the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was higher paced. Mid to late 90s, it started to slow down a little bit, up into the mid 2000s. Like, you go into 2004 finals, 2005, look how slow paced that is. Obviously today it's high, but just listen to what I'm saying. They averaged 105 points per game. That's a lot of points for that specific era, right? But they held their opponents to 92 points per game. To me, that's insane. That means they averaged 13 points more than their opposition. They had an SRS score of 11.80. To me, that's freaking insane. Yeah, So like I said, they go 72-10. The first round, they're matched up with the Miami Heat. Not even a question. They defeat them 3-0. Second round, they're matched up with the Knicks. And the only game that the Knicks would win is Game 3. I remember that game. But, the Bulls beat them in 5. So the conference finals, it's a rematch against the Orlando Magic. The team that beat them the year prior. And this was a great team. They went 60-22. Well, the Bulls didn't make it fair. They didn't even... I didn't expect this. Watching this series, that it'd be this much of a blowout, but the Bulls beat the living hell out of them. Like Game 1, for example, the Bulls beat them 121-83. Game 3, for example, the Bulls won 86-67. They'd end up sweeping the Magic. Now, the finals, they were matched up, and I think had the Bulls not exist, people would have talked about this Seattle team. They went 64-18. They were the second best defensive rated team that year. And they were the 8th best offense. Now, they weren't a joke on defense either, like I said. They averaged 104.5 points per game, and they held their opponents to 96 points per game. This had the 96 Defensive Player of the Year in Gary Payton. They had guys like Detlef Schrempf, Hersey Hawkins, Sean Kemp, Nate McMillan, who was a great defensive guard. Eric Snow, who didn't play a lot of minutes because he was young during the time, but he was a great defensive guard later on. And the series itself wasn't fair either. The Bulls would win the first 3 games. That put it out of reach for the Sonics. So at this point, the Sonics were just delaying the inevitable. Game 4, the Sonics would win 107-86. And Game 5, the Sonics would win 89-78. But on Father's Day, Jordan would win it for his father. How fitting is that? He comes back to basketball and wins it on Father's Day in honor of his deceased father. They win Game 6, 87-75. And overall for this series, right, the Bulls would average themselves 40.8 rebounds per game. They just out-rebounded the Sonics. So having Rodman obviously helped them a lot. And I've heard some people make the argument that they felt Dennis Rodman deserved Finals MVP over Jordan. I don't know if I agree with that. Just because Jordan's numbers, they weren't bad. I mean, he averaged 27 points per game, but these weren't Jordan numbers. They held him to 41% shooting. And a crazy thing is they didn't start guarding Jordan. Gary Payton didn't until Game 3. I don't know what the fuck the coaches were thinking in Seattle. You should have your best defensive player guard the best offensive player on the other team. I don't know, man. It just makes sense to me. But they didn't have him, for whatever reason, guard him until Game 3. And that's when Seattle won those 2 games. But it was too late by then for Seattle. So the Bulls would win it. That'd be their 4th championship. And let's talk about their awards this year. So Jordan was the MVP that year. And Scottie Pippen was an all-star. So was Jordan. Like I said, Tony Kukoc was the 6th man of the year. And also, Jordan won Finals MVP, like I mentioned, but he also got All-Defensive First Team. Phil Jackson would win Coach of the Year. Scottie Pippen would get All-Defensive First Team and All-Defensive First Team and All-NBA First Team. Dennis Rodman would get All-Defensive First Team as well, and he'd be the rebounding leader. So that's crazy. They have 3 players on their team that are All-Defensive First Team. And Jerry Krause would get Executive of the Year. And like I said, in my opinion, this is the greatest team of all time. I just think they can match up with any team in any era. They were mentally tough. They were deep. They knew how to defend. And, it's crazy to me when people say this team couldn't match up with the 2017 Warriors or other great teams. To me, I don't see it, man. I think this team can go toe-to-toe with anyone in any era. And to give you an idea how dominant they are, the Bulls started the season 37-0 at home. And this was part of the then NBA record 44-game winning streak that included games from the 94-95 regular season. Their 33 road wins were the most in NBA history until the 2016 Warriors. So just crazy, crazy dominant. That's the 96 Bulls capturing their 4th championship. Let me know what you guys think down below. Are they the greatest team of all time? Or are the 17 Warriors the greatest team? Or who do you think is the greatest team of all time? Let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching.